Okay, so I think we can begin now. So my name is Robert Ortung. I'm a research professor here at the Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at George Washington University. And I'm very happy to welcome you today to this event on how to survive the Russian invasion, which will be an important discussion and timely conversation about the psychological impact this war is having on Ukrainians. And this is part of our Petrak program on Ukraine. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Sarah Hedlund right now, and she will introduce our speakers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for such an important discussion. My name is Sarah Hedlund, and I'm a clinical psychologist and psychoanalyst also at GW's Professional Psychology program. We have a broad range of expertise here in this panel. These professionals are working with Ukrainians of different age groups and professions and situations who have had their lives disrupted by the war in unique ways. I want to get into the discussion, so I will just briefly introduce our first panelist, Dr. Olena Merzliakova, who is at the Borys, who is an associate professor at the Teaching Training Institute of Borys Grinchenko, Kyiv University, and a consultant of the National Psychological Association's Support Crisis Hotline. Her current research is on identifying key strategies of resilience in Ukrainian teachers during the war. Thank you.
So I can to start, yes, now. No, I'm happy to start this very interesting meeting, and I'm sorry, but I decided to talk in English. Maybe my English not is perfect, but it's my solidarity with thousands and millions of Ukrainian people who go abroad and who must express them in not native English too. And my presentation, I will talk about teachers, but it's more than teachers, about Ukrainians at all, how we must to survive with this situation and how we must to adapt for this situation. So sorry, 1 minute, I put my presentation. Firstly, wait a minute, yes. Wait a minute. Technical details is anywhere, yes. And no, I told I will tell about school teachers and school study in Ukraine. It continues according to schedule despite military actions, shelling, daily alarms, periodic lack of power and mobile and internet communication. And many participants of educational progress feel unbalanced. And in this presentation, we will talk about psychological resilience and how it helps to work in crisis conditions. So our research is a part of wider program, Codes of Resilience Development to improve the resilience skills of pedagogues. Until the end of January 2023, 3,020 people took part in this study. And the sample was randomly selected. More often, these were pedagogues involved in formal or informal training or stress resilience skills. It was groups of psychological stabilization and support for Ukrainian teachers from March to July 2022. I must to say it also was teachers who was in occupied territory, and even on this picture, for me it's very touching to see pictures. They was near Kherson, who knows it was occupied territory, and we made for them specially groups. Also, it was face-to-face psychotherapy groups of teachers and their children who suffered from bombing in Kharkiv. We know Kharkiv, it's near Russia, our big city near Russia, and people suffered a lot of bombing, of attacks, and we worked with teachers and with these children. It's also part of our research. It was July, August 2022 in a special rehabilitation center near Kharkiv. Also, it was a group training of resilient skills for school teachers in Kyiv. It was from September till December 2022. Sometimes it was at the school shelters, and now you see at the picture, it was again alarm, and we go to this shelter and we make now our communication these shelters. If to say about sample by regions on Ukraine, you can see at this slide, the most it was Kyiv and near Kyiv, central part of Ukraine. A little bit it was also western regions, 10%, and a little bit east regions, but not in the east, but this teacher who go to more suffer places. If to tell about specialization of our sample, mostly it was school teachers, 53%. And you can see on slide also it was where school psychologists, administrative staff, and other educators. For this research, we use basic PH model of Professor Muli Lachat. This model consists of 6 channels for compete with tracks: beliefs, affect, sociability, imagination, cognition, and physiology. And the leader of reading was the channel C, cognition. Now we can connect this with higher intellectualization of pedagogical job. The second important for indicator was B, beliefs. It means that respondents rely on internal resources of their own system of beliefs, values and meaning, hope, self-esteem and religious settings. But they most often Ukrainian talk about they believe in our Ukrainian army and strong spirit of the Ukrainian people. And regarding to average values for each component of the basic PH model, for sample of teachers only, the distribution is similar to the whole sample. The cognitive settings is the most influential way of overcoming stress. So skills of analysis, critical thinking, planning strategies, etc. is the most common resilience strategies of teachers. Such skills develop in parallel with age and work experience. But these methods may not work well in the situation of instability, uncertainty, even a certain chaos which the educational system experience in the times of war. The second most influenced factor of stress resistance is the worldview of teachers. Its influence increases until about age 60 and then stabilize. In the conditions of global cataclysms and restructuring of the whole social system, such stability of the worldview of teachers can be an additional stress factor and not a resilience strategy. Teachers don't use enough their own emotional settings, affect, to overcome stress during the whole period of activity. This can become a direction to improving their resilience. The same goes for their creativity, imagination, and it's especially important to activate the imagination and creative skills of teachers aged 30-50. The readiness of teachers to rely on the support of communities in difficult times also needs attention and additional research. This factor turned out to be the least influential. And a little bit about use of research results in the practice of development the resilience of Ukrainian teachers. What we do now, first of all, to do better the beliefs, the cognitive settings, we make trainings of reflections of value orientations and development mature worldview settings. It can also be practical seminars of critical thinking skills and self-coaching. The second direction is emotional intellect, development of ability of teachers to understand their own emotions and use their resource to find emotional balance in stressful situation. I must to say the old picture, I show a picture from our training. I made with my mobile, this picture. It's real picture from our training. And when I saw this, I feel very, very touching because I remember how it was this emotional, this exercises was emotional changing of the emotional state in couple. Next direction, it's trainings of activation of creative potential. And I must to say the best teachers of primary school are the best in this direction because creativity is very important and they use all the time. It's very typical for primary school teachers. I told that social intellect, it's not so used so much, and it's also a next direction what we use in our training for teachers. And secondary school is a social institute of society in general, and the ability to track and use such connection will benefit both for educators themselves and also the other members of society related to education, parents, business representatives, mass media workers, etc. And in the end, I want to show a small piece of our training. It will be formula of happiness from Kyiv Gymnasium and their teacher. It was very spontaneous video, really very spontaneous, but I want to share with you the whole mood of teachers in the end of our training. So formula of happiness from teachers of Ukraine. Wait a minute, please. I don't understand when. Yes.
У нас заключний момент мистецтво бути щасливою людиною. І я дуже щаслива, що цей заклад освіти, це щастя. Відео школи 13. 3 слова. Сім'я. Гармонія. Перемога. Любов.
Сім'я і мрія.
Перемога. Щаслива родина. Любов. Мир. Сім'я. Кохання. Щаслива. Любов. Родина. Кохання.
Майбутнє.
Сім'я – це любов, а це мир. А мир – мир, сім'я, любов.
Мир, сім'я, впевненість.
Любов, сім'я, перемога. А тепер всі разом. 3 слова. Перемога.
Перемога. Мир.
Щастя.
Thank you very much for such a fascinating presentation.
Yes,
Next.
and I finish with to show emotional of our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we have Dr. Larysa Bakhmutova, who is a lecturer at the National University of Ukraine on physical education and sport, and the lead researcher at the Kostiuk Institute of Psychology of the National Academy of Educational Sciences of Ukraine. Her current research is on peculiarities of psychological disorders among Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, dear colleagues. I want to turn on the screen. Let me introduce my presentation about peculiarities of psychological disorders among Ukrainian refugees in Poland. I'd like to give you some background information about the war in Ukraine. Ukraine has more than 600,000 square kilometers. This is the largest country located entirely in Eastern Europe. The location of Ukraine you can see on the map. 1 year ago, Russia suddenly and unjustifiably attacked Ukraine. Tens of millions peacefully sleeping people in the cities and villages in the center of Europe wake up under from rockets, bombs, and artillery. The entire civilized world faced a huge threat and saw the terrible consequences of this barbarian invasion. The war does not spare the civilian population, neither children, nor women, nor aged people, especially destruction of the infrastructure of towns, villages, and is aimed at destroying the physical, social, economic, and cultural life of more than 43 million Ukrainians. Millions of Ukrainian people apparently say about themselves, I am a refugee. They left their homes in search of salvation. Naturally, those people felt a wide range of destructive emotions. The pain, fear, loss, grief, stress, confusion, powerlessness, anger, suffering, anxiety, tension, etc. As a powerful and high-intensity stressor, the war drove millions of Ukrainians to seek shelter in safe places. Since the end of Second World War, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the world is going through the most serious refugee crisis in Europe. The tragic events of military aggression had a negative impact on the mental state of people who escaped to the West. Poland was the first Western country which opened the door for Ukrainians. From the first day of the war, Polish border guards passed through the border thousands and thousands of refugees. A lot of people from the Polish side day and night helped to refugees with food, transport, therapy, sharing their clothes and money. They said from the bottom of their hearts, and it was very touching. Ukrainian and Polish psychologists as volunteers provided psychophysiological and psychological first aid to refugees at reception points. We experienced the horrors of war together. One of the photos you can see on the refugee camp on the Polish border. Because we were participants in the tragic events, we decided to examine the psychological state of Ukrainian refugees during the first months of the war. The purpose of our study is to identify the features of psychological disorders among Ukrainian refugees in Poland. We studied by identifying the psychological problems of the refugees and determining the directions and methods of stabilizing the psychological state. The methodological background was a qualitative research, the different opinions and necessity of people by interviews, questionnaire answers, informal conversation, as well as providing feedback to Ukrainian refugees who needed psychological counseling during the crisis period. The following disorders are most often observed. First, the psychological and psychosomatic disorders. Some of the wording you can see on the slide. Like there is no physical strength. Any morning exercise is like violence against oneself. I'm sick probably because I'm keeping my feelings inside, and so and so and so. Second, the cognitive disorders. There are typical phrases you can see in the screen. For example, and so the socio-psychological disorders. As example, we can see some wording on the slide. It's wording our researchers too. Ukrainian people are very emotionally impressionable because they are an empathic nation. They are full of feeling, but the emotions are not destructive. The emotions are drive to unity and opposition, where the psychological help plays a key role. This process in the psychologist's work is chemically shown in the diagram. I can't do. We see the scheme of psychological assistance of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. The empathy, contacting, dialogue, expressing grief, alleviation, and consolidation for people. Directions of stabilizing the psychological state of refugees is psychophysiological, the adaptation in other living conditions, maintaining own psychological state. Two, the individual and psychological, the identification of personal characteristics. Emotional, the observances of the usual way of life and traditions. Social adaptation and communication, and professional directions, its employment, improving qualifications, or changing the type of professional activity. Conclusions. So the horrors of the war directly affected the psychological state of Ukrainians. Refugees are characterized by emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and social disturbances. One time, as evidenced by studies of various war and military conflicts, which beginning from the Second World War, the various mental post-traumatic stress disorders become as a result of various of physical traumas. We identified and observed certain signs of violence among Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much for this very important work, Dr. Bakhmutova. We will now turn to Dr. Vitaly Lunov, an associate professor at Bogomolets National Medical University in Kyiv. His most recent work is on understanding the psychological changes in Ukrainian youth and young adults during the 2022 Russian invasion.
Well, dear colleagues, let me pay my graduate to the university, George Washington University, to the faculty members for this special attitude to Ukrainian case, and I believe to Ukrainian syndrome is when we call it in the future, or maybe in our nowadays. Did you see my presentation? No, I didn't see it.
Yes, we see.
Yes.
Okay. But I still didn't see my presentation. Okay, so today I try to explain the phenomenology of Ukrainian syndrome and psychological changes in Ukrainian youth and Ukrainian adults during the 2024 Russian invasion. I must tell that the understanding of some idea of Ukrainian syndrome as a social, cultural, and psychological phenomenon was first proposed by Professor Mikhailo Matyash, the head of the Department of General Medical Psychology at Bogomolets National Medical University, and his colleagues in 2014. In fact, Ukrainian syndrome as the result of any mental trauma, Professor Matyash think like this, and its trauma can be like war, natural disaster, accident, mutilation, violence. The logic of the study provided for the objectification of the impact of direct military operations and the current situation on the life, property status, and health of the Ukrainians. In this context, we proceed from the model of spatial relational disposition of a traumatic event, which reflects the level of objectivity of the loss, threat at the individual, family-related, and the level of the immediate environment. And thus, it was nothing the tendency of the field of property loss in the direction of their increase from the individual level to the level of the nearest social environment. This may be one of the factors inducting social stress at the ratio of the personal losses to the losses of the others, closed area. Significantly large losses in the immediate environment of an individual can act as potentially significant factors in reducing the zone of personal safety. And modern understanding of the Ukrainian syndrome, you should note that the Ukrainian syndrome differs from other war syndromes in connection with the exclusive anti-Ukrainian nationalistic position of Russian military aggression. Even the so-called special military operation of Russia against Ukraine is officially declared to be focused exclusively on the national factor. They call it denazification or denationalization. This is why all the reasons of the war are not working now. The Russian-Ukrainian war has existential character. This is why we can call this war syndrome with a specialized field like Ukrainian syndrome, because it's against nationality, against Ukrainian nationality. And they are fighting us because we are Ukrainians, not for another reasons. They clearly declared their own position of Kremlin, like denationalization, denazification of Ukraine. It's like some centuries or some years before you can vote against skin colors or any national identification of the person. So this is why only a nationalized syndrome, not a geopolitical syndrome, not usual war, as you know. So it's really anti-national, anti-human syndrome in the world, which Russia now proposed and trying to find any advocacies even in European Union countries and in the United States, as you know. And the Ukrainian syndrome is a certain behavioral pattern, it's my idea, of adaptation and individual position of Ukrainian regarding to Russian-Ukrainian war now. And in my presentation, I want to draw attention to the dissertation research of my colleagues, in whose PhD research I was supervisor. It was these studies that formed the meta-theoretical foundations of our study of Ukrainian syndrome. You can find the dissertation research by Bezpeka Hanna, Clinical and Psychological Peculiarities of Personification as a Resource of Overcoming Negative Experiences, Subota Spartak, Clinical and Neuropsychological Determination of the Rehabilitation Potential of Individual, Yevlanova Elena, Psychological Features of the Attributive Style, Determination of the Hardness of the Individual, and Pishanska Olga, Features of Manifestation of Emotional Status of the Persons with Social Deprivation. All this research was conducted to first displaced person and military servicemen in Ukraine during the real war from 2014 to this time. As you know, my dear American and international colleagues, in the world before 2022, nobody felt about the Russian politics and Russian war in Ukraine like about war. They say like about some operation or internal conflict on something else, but in fact, from 2014, Ukrainians still in wartime, in real war. So I believe my colleagues can say yes for this topic, that all dissertation research, all clinical research, all psychological research in Ukraine from 2014, it's research about wartime in Ukraine, in fact, because we are in war now from 2014 till now. And in this presentation, I draw your special attention to my joint research with my colleague, Professor Bogdan Tkach, the head of Scientific and Practical Center of Neuropsychology and Psychosomatics at Deva Clinic, and with Dr. Vasyl Matychuk. I believe you will see a new understanding of the neuropersonality factor of Ukrainian syndrome. And please look at the research of Bezpeka Hanna, Clinical and Psychological Peculiarities of Personification as a Resource of a Common Traumatic Experience. The model of personification of traumatic experience in group of Ukrainian internal refugees looks like this. Personification is very close to confrontational coping, internal self delineation in deficit position, external self delineation in constructive position. It's correlated to distress index, somatization, depression, and obsessive compulsive disorders. And I recommend to all of you to pay your attention to Bezpeka verbal imaginative logization method, the effective system of psychological assistance and correction of the Ukrainian syndrome, as we can call it now. And please pay your attention to research of Dr. Spartak Subota. He determined the conditioning of psychotraumatic experience of Ukrainian refugees and military servicemen in persons with neurotic disorders and the persons with the somatogenous or somatogenic disorders. And you can show the differences between these two groups. And we believe that neuropsychological determination of rehabilitation potential is different to point like a neurotic position and somatogenic position. Also, I want to pay your attention to research of my colleague Elena Yevlanova, psychological features of attributive still determination of the hardness of the individual. It's a really great research because she finds that attributive and stylistic determination of hardness of the female refugees can be presented by negativism, non-involvement, isolation, pragmatic effective control, proactive narcissistic strategy. And we can talk about attributive and stylistic determination of the hardness of the male refugee, presented by narcissistic, non-involvement, hostile, masculine dominant politics, stable, proactive, and passive detachment. Let me show you the main research of Olga Pishanska. She believed that forced migrants in Ukraine and the host population are considered as a homogeneous bilateral group, which is subjected to a socially conditioned influence of everyday consciousness and living conditions. So the deprivation conditioning of the emotional status of UA male refugees is substantiated at the level of the connection of the social deprivation of freedom of choice with the growth of hostility and conflict and the strengthening the elation depression dichotomy. She finds the triangle of social deprivation of UA female refugees consists of the experience of social gender deprivation and its direct connection with general social deprivation of loss of meaning, and its direction connect with the general social deprivation. And let me focus your attention to the scientific school of first Ukrainian neuropsychologist, modern neuropsychologist in neurophenomenology approach, Bogdan Tkach, medical doctor and professor of clinical neuropsychology. He believes that we can understand Ukrainian situation and Ukrainian syndrome. He believes and me believes, we have close, have spent research in this field. We believe that if we can compare the determining the level of stress, the determination of neuropsychological or neuropersonality types, and determination of the level of psychological attraction to poverty, it's really a great problem in Ukraine. Psychological attraction to poverty. We can understand what can be happened with Ukrainians in these very dark times in Ukraine. And
so this is also very important, and it's very interesting. In the interest of time, maybe you could just make some concluding remarks.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm the most idea. So you may know that we have a research. That research was conducted with the 2,891 youth and young adults in Ukraine from 61 cities and local communities. This study was from April 2022 to January 2023. Here is two scales which we used in this research, and we have some result of this research, you can find it in this full article. I can send for everyone who are interested in this research. And the biggest idea of our research that we can explain everyone, the very idea that some of the pre-war symptoms and behavioral patterns that could have hindered the adaptation of the respondents, Ukrainian respondents, in the conditions of war and internal displacements have disappeared. So we find 12% of losing negative symptoms of Ukrainian youth and youth adults. And this is why we believe that we are real children of Cossacks' characters, the most powerful in the middle age of history of Europe. So,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear professor. Sorry for my so long report.
That's okay. Thank you for presenting this very important work. So much important work has been already presented, but in the interest of time, we have one more presenter, Dr. Ludmila Kolensnik, who is a counseling psychologist and senior lecturer in psychology at Sumy State University in Ukraine and a research fellow at the Aarhus University in Denmark. Her most recent research is on psychological services and the mental health of students at Ukrainian universities. Thank you.
Good morning or good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the results of my research. Just a moment, I'll share the screen one more time. Okay. So the aim of my research was to identify the state of university students' mental health in the wartime in Ukraine. And I would like to begin with the short words of acknowledgements to my colleagues from the Association of Psychologists of High School of Ukraine. It is the network of psychologists who work in the universities of Ukraine in the counseling services. We made and we are making now a lot of interesting projects, and one of these projects is this research. My colleagues helped me to gather the data. So the instrument that we used conducting the survey, you see on the screen. There are 5 scales that we used, and there are also several questions. The process of data collection, it was a web-based survey. It was conducted during February and May 2023, and we use RedCap platform to collect the data. Our sample are students, 2,592 students from 23 higher educational establishments of Ukraine. These universities locate in 12 cities. You see the list of cities on the screen. The list represents all regions of Ukraine. I mean, Western, Eastern, Northern, Southern, and central part of Ukraine. Characteristics of our participants. The most participants are female. As for the age, the majority of our participants are from 17 to 25, but we have also some other age groups you see on the screen. Then we asked about the academic year of the students, and we have many students from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd year, and less students from 4th, 5th, and 6th years. And we also asked about the place of living during recent time. And many of our respondents lived at home. But you see that there are those who lived in dormitories or rent something, was or were internally displaced or lived abroad. Just a moment, can't switch my presentation. Something doesn't work. That was the results. The first scale is the hospital anxiety and depression scale. And you see the results. Normal state of anxiety, we have 42% of participants, borderline 24%, and abnormal 34%. As for the depression, normal state 60%, borderline 23%, and abnormal 17%. As for the Beck's depression inventory, we have more groups. Normal state 42%, mild mood disturbance 21%, borderline clinical depression 13%, moderate depression 17%, severe depression 5%, and extreme depression 2%. We used also Spielberger state rate anxiety inventory, and we have here a similar result, similar between state and rate anxiety. Allowed participants with high level of anxiety, state anxiety 56%, rate anxiety 60%, moderate anxiety 30% of state anxiety and 33% of trait anxiety, and little amount, yes, of those who have a low level of state or trait anxiety. We used also Coffin's perceived stress scales, and our respondents say that low stress have only 20%, moderate 63%, and high perceived stress scale, it's 17%. We also use Ryff scale of psychological well-being, and you see that the vast majority of students have low psychological well-being. High psychological well-being. We also asked our students about the most common symptoms of PTSD, and you see that nearly 60% of respondents says about blood pressure increasing or decreasing, about fast tiredness, about sleep disturbances. Also, many respondents, nearly 40%, speak about headache or some problems with appetite. Only 14% say that they have no problems, no problems from the list, and nearly 7% speak about some other problems not mentioned in the question. We also try to find some correlation between these psychological characteristics and age, gender, year, and place of living. And you see here that we have some correlation. I want to describe it. You see just on the screen to save the time. Then I would like to present the comparison between the results of the survey that we conducted several years ago. It was in November, December 2020. We have the same, not all the list, but still some same questionnaires that we used. It was also a web-based survey. We used Google Forms at that time. 725 students took part in this survey. They were from 17 to 25 years old and represented 16 higher education establishments of Ukraine, also from different parts of Ukraine. It was during the pandemic COVID-19, and it's interesting for us to compare the results, what we have now, and what we had during the time during COVID. So we compared the results using the hospital anxiety and depression scale. And you see from the graphs some difference. We have more anxiety and more depression now. We checked the differences with the help of statistical methods, and we found statistically significant difference between these two surveys. And also back depression inventory. We compared the results from 2020 and from now. And it's a surprise, yes, and it's interesting that here we don't see the significant difference between these 2 years. So going back, you see that according to HUTS, we have this difference, but according to Beck's depression inventory, we have just the same results in these 2 years. It's very interesting to analyze further why we have such results. Also, we asked our students about the form of work with psychologists, because having such results, very high results of depression or anxiety, we understand that we as psychologists have to work with this, and we have to choose some methods that are most appropriate for our students, and we just asked them what is better for them. And as you see from the screen, offline counseling choose more than 70% of students. We have more now, and it's not easy to work face-to-face. And we could suggest that it's better to work remotely, to work online, but we see from the results that students choose offline counseling as the most suitable form of work. But online counseling is also popular, so 38, just a little bit more than 38%. Lectures, publications, and some podcasts in the internet also popular, nearly 29%. And also you see that the other form are also chosen, but not so many times. It's interesting to see that only 4% of respondents say that there are no forms that they prefer to choose. Working with psychologists, maybe it's those respondents who just refuse from psychological help and cope with their psychological states with some other methods. And also 5% of students choose some other methods not mentioned in the survey. This all. Maybe you have some questions. We have several minutes, and I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
I think we just have 1 minute for questions. So there is a question for Dr. Merzliakova, which was focusing on, are there online or in-person support groups for youth, for young people in Ukraine? And maybe Dr. Merzliakova, you could answer that one.
Ну, зараз я скажу як представник кризової лінії Національної психологічної асоціації, бо люди, коли звертаються до нас, ми маємо їх перенаправляти. І в нас є перелік і груп онлайн з різних напрямів, або горювання за втратою, або групи там для біженців, або групи людей, що чекають людей з полону. І в нас є перелік груп онлайнових, і офлайн, і онлайн. Тобто в залежності від того, який є запит, ми перенаправляємо до тих партнерів, хто займається цією категорією. Але маю сказати, це поки що трохи хаотично, бо воно вибудовується, де люди організовуються, де є волонтери, де є фахівці. Це є, але дещо не структуровано хаотично. І, до речі, ідея, ми зараз на лінії опрацьовуємо необхідність структурованої організації груп для тих людей, що потребують допомоги. Ну, поки що про онлайн. Так, дякую.
Okay, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the hour, so let me thank all the speakers for joining us and Dr. Sarah Hedlund for helping to moderate the discussion. We really appreciate your input, and thank you to all the audience members who joined us today for the discussion. This will be posted online, so if you wanted to go back and look at the slides or hear the presentations again, that will be available shortly online. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.